I think all of you here know me. I'm giving a lecture about my journey in martial arts. I call it Black Belt. It will be structured more as a story with the information intertwined in between. So no starting curriculum. We'll just dive into. So let's begin by defining what a martial art here is, or at least try to define it. Most of us probably have some image from maybe Karate Kid or something like that of something very spiritual, always with gi, with belts. Oxford definition, various sports or skills, mainly of Japanese origins, that originated as forms of self-defense, attacks such as judo, karate, and kendo. Well, I don't agree with that. The diagram that I found doesn't agree with that as well. You have freestyle wrestling here, you have martial arts from all over the world. I prefer the Wikipedia one. Martial arts, codified systems and traditions of combat practiced for a number of reasons. And it doesn't specify which, like, it doesn't have to be either spiritual, it doesn't even have to be practical for any reason. You see that here you have lots of martial arts that have weapons. I have no experience in martial arts using weapons, so the focus of the lecture will be on unarmed martial arts and specific unarmed martial arts. Well, a little bit about the history. We have a quote here: war never changes, only weapons are new. I think it's a tribute to some general, and it also appears in one of my favorite computer games, Fallout. And you can find evidence of martial art training, of structured curriculum for fighting all over history. The earliest one is this bust from Egypt, which shows some military training, an image of some military training, wrestling, first evidence, 2600 BC in Sumer, boxing, 2000 BC in Sumer, and in 2000 BC in Egypt, you can also find something that looks like some kind of an attempt to create a manual full of techniques here. And first written manuscripts around the 5th, 2nd century in India and Greek.
You know if they used to actually wrestle with buckets on their heads?
I don't know. I would prefer to leave most of the questions for the end of the lecture because, as I said, it's really. So I said that you concentrate on the unarmed type of combats, and it can be roughly divided into two main categories, and the combination of these categories. First one is striking, characterized by damage which is inflicted on contacts: punches, elbows, knees, kicks. You damage the opponent the moment you make contact with them. The other one, the one that I'm more familiar with, and hence I focus on it, are grappling arts. In grappling arts, first you grab a hold, you close the distance to the opponent, and then you do something with that. That something can either be a takedown or a throw, take damage with a throw, or you get the opponent to the ground in order to control him, or do something else, which are chokes, where you close up the arteries, close the blood to the brain or the air supply, or joint locks, which is hyperextending the joint in order for the opponent either to be injured if you are in a real battle, or to concede defeats in more civilized venues of this. So I'll start with Judo, which is the first martial art I've been exposed to, the first one I've. Judo, something that derived from Jiu-Jitsu. Jiu-Jitsu was a samurai martial art. Well, actually, many samurai martial arts, because there have been many schools of Jiu-Jitsu. But by the 19th century, it was considered a little bit barbaric. There were some movements like eye gouging, some things that you wouldn't want to send your kids to, and Japan started to become more westernized, and just jiu-jitsu was waning down. That's one reason that it's branched from there. The second reason, well, Kano took Jiu-Jitsu, because of Jiu-Jitsu, and he removed these dangerous moves from it. What you got is something that you could actually train with full resistance in. If I take an analogy to optimization, you put some constraints and it allows you to converge to points easier, faster. And actually, they had a challenge in the Japanese police, which martial art is going to be taught. And Judo won it. Now I put an asterisk on it because the human variable here might be a lot stronger than the martial art variable. So it's always a question. Like comparing martial arts is a bit problematic. And the story here was one really good student that lasted through the competition. So take everything here and everything comparing different martial arts with a grain of salt. Okay, so more interesting things about judo, which actually some of them I've learned when I've made this lecture, even though I've been practicing it for years. It is the first martial art that was actually meant to be a vehicle for personal progress and for education. I think that martial arts have always been spiritual, but it was not the case. Like usually they were just ways to teach combat. We started to be the educational elements around 19th century, both in China and Japan. China, people moved to the cities and martial arts instructors, that's the only thing they knew. They had to somehow sell themselves, and you found advertisement like Mr. Chow was aggressive, he didn't handle life, he started training and he became better, became more relaxed, more calm. Judo was actually constructed with this in mind. We have a quote here by Kano: the ultimate goal of judo is to perfect yourself and contribute to society. I leave this for now and we'll come back to it in the end. Leave the most interesting best parts to the end of the lecture. And also, judo is the first martial art that you actually have a belt system. Black belt, this man invented it. It was to give motivation to students to show their progress. And originally there were only white and black belts in his judo, and they've added the brown later. You know, colorful belts, we'll get to it later, but adults in Japan only have the white, brown, black, and senior red ones, which are for people who play for like 50 years. And that's a nice story behind that. I titled this Judo because in the in the gender arena, the person who brought judo to be a accepted women's sport, it was considered a little bit too barbaric for women in the beginning. The Jewish mother and grandma from Brooklyn, named Rina Kanokogi, originally Rina Glickman. So that's just a nice side story to connect us here to Israel. You have a podcast, History for Children, a chapter on her, very recommended. Amazing story. Okay, so judo is a grappling art. It has throws, it has arm locks, only on the elbow in judo. You hyperextend the elbow until the person taps to signal he is conceding defeat. You have chokes, and you have pins, which is holding the opponent with his back to the mattress. Why only with his back to the mattress? A good question. I much prefer my opponent to be belly down if I'm actually fighting him, but these are the rules, these are the constraints. Sometimes you get some strange local minimas. That's that. And it has a core principle of efficient. preferably using the opponent's movements and momentum to execute the throws rather than going brute force inside him. Well, the common practice of judo, you start with the warm up, you learn how to break falls, then you drill techniques. Philosophy of judo is to do something called uchikomi, which is like repeating the movements over and over again, sometimes hundreds of times until all of your energy is drained from your muscles. You do it as a warm up in the beginning of training. Then you have a section which you would train ground techniques, pins, submissions. You spar from the knees, and at the end, you would get to the main course of judo, which are standing techniques. In judo, you always teach the technique in parts. Kuzushi, off balancing the opponent. Before you do any technique, before you do a throw, you actually have to get the opponent to where you can throw him without breaking yourself. And actually, most of the fights, most of the arts, in my opinion, is done in this part. How to maneuver your opponent to where you can actually throw him. After that, Tukoi, the movement which you actually lift the opponent, either put him on you or off balance him, get him on the way to the ground, and finally the throw itself. So you teach a technique, then you would do some static drilling, then you would drill it in motion, like instead of from the place, you would move with your opponent and enter the techniques while you're moving with them. And finally, usually there will be a sparring session, only standing, usually because, well, you cannot allow people to be on the ground where other people are throwing themselves. It will result in injury. Okay, so, well, I started judo around the age of 6. What happened during this time, 92, Oren Smaja and Yael Arad. Yael Arad won a silver medal. After that, Oren Smaja won a bronze medal, the first medals Israel ever had in the Olympics. To this day, judo is one of the top Olympic sports in Israel, along with gymnastics and I can't remember the word for shites. Yeah. I actually can't remember if I started doing judo before that or after that. I actually got to the conclusion that I started a little bit before that, but judo started to become very popular in Israel after that. So I started in 1992. The judo was practiced mostly in school gyms. You will come, you will put the mattresses on the ground there, you will fold them at the end of the last practice. Instructors, most of the time part-time instructors, high schoolers would do it as a part-time job. I had an instructor for 3 years. His main job was a mailman. During these years, I had like 5 or 6 regional competitions. Won the first 5 of them, much to the amazement of my instructors at the time. Used to be airheaded. My mom used to call me an astronaut. The last one, I got silver. And I actually left judo after that. I had a scheduled class, skipped class, and they had some social program that clashed with that, and I thought it would do me more good than doing that. In retrospective, maybe a mistake, but you don't know that at the time. And no one pressured me to stay. No one even tried to convince me to stay. I think my mother was afraid because I had some sort of head injury a year before. I actually had a window falling from a second floor on my head in school.
Unrelated to judo.
Unrelated to judo. 3 months of being at home with various amounts of headaches, some of it faked probably. and ended in a epileptic-like seizure. Happened only once, but probably one of the reasons no one pressured me to stay from my family. And well, the instructor, I don't even know if he had my home phone. We didn't have cell phones there. You know, well, I left it at around 1997. I had a green belt. We moved apartment 1998. A few years after everyone else got it, I got cables. What you have on cables is pro wrestling, something theatric known to be scripted. And you have something called Bushido, which was sold as the real thing. Now, I don't know if everyone knows, but it's scripted as well, but they would kick the hell out of each other. Like, they would actually execute the moves, but the outcome was predetermined. Got me the issue to do that. I would play wrestling in school. Around 7th grade, well, my friends at school knew me as someone who had done judo, and some of them wanted to. Also, people that stopped doing judo wanted to do judo again. They contacted me. We went to an instructor named Itzik Smaja. If the name Smaja is familiar, he is the brother of Oren Smaja. And we came back. After a year, the only one that still practiced judo from these people is me. Big difference, the Smajas are full-time instructors with a network of clubs all over the area of Netanya, the Sharon area. They do it as their full-time work. Training venues were still community centers, sports gym, like that. I had 2 practices a week in these gyms and 1 practice at the weekend with people from all over the network coming to another gym in Koran, Tzoran. So I went back there. I was awarded. I was awarded a blue belt pretty fast. It is a good place to speak about belt progression in judo. So, as I said, in Japan, you only have the white, the brown, and the black belt. The colorful belts were first added in Europe as a way to make kids not too frustrated. It was later added in Japan as well. Japan, I think, is the country with the highest rate of child suicide in the world. I don't know why it is. And to go from the blue to from the white to the blue belt, it's mostly the instructor discretion and very structured curriculum. You need to know this technique and this technique and this technique to get to each stage there. Now, something else happens when you get to the brown and the black belt. You actually have to get 10 points. How do you get these points? Well, you either win 5 matches in competition. If you win over someone in the same belt, you get 1 point. Someone with a belt higher than yours, 1.5 point. Someone lower, half a point. There could be 4 or 5 official competitions a year. If you are good, you might get each belt progression in about a year. By the age of 18, you might be a black belt in judo already. How does a judo competition day goes? Well, we start with a weigh-in. You must be below. Judo is divided into weight categories and gender categories. And you have to come on competition morning below an allotted weight. I usually weighed 81 kilos when I was a teenager. Worst thing about it, the biggest competition was in Hanukkah, usually at the last days of Hanukkah, so I wouldn't eat sufganiyot when I was a teen at all. The structure was an elimination style bracket. You win, you might actually end your day there. If you had the luck to lose to someone who got to the semifinals, you would have another opportunity to go to a mini bracket, an opportunity to win bronze. Matches, there were 5 minutes of net time with golden scores if nothing had been achieved until the end of the initial 5 minutes. And the unique thing about martial art competition, there is something of a knockout condition. You don't have it in other sports, but if a certain condition is satisfied and the match ends immediately, in judo the most common one is being thrown on your back. Okay. I will show it. Okay, Ariel Zerbi, 2010 World Championship. Seconds, that's that. The man trained for an entire year, doesn't have any life, and one moment missing concentration and it's over just like that. That's soul crushing. So sad? But he's a Japanese. Japanese one. That's a big difference than I am. So a match can either be
Barely touched it.
so a match might be grueling 5 minutes, and 5 minutes sounds like a short time. Believe me, it is not. Even when I was in good shape, I would end up spent after 5 minutes plus golden score if I reach that.
What is DQ?
DQ is you have done something which is not allowed by the rules, it's disqualification. Either doing something which is very dangerous to yourself or something very dangerous to your opponent, or being passive. Penalties, basically. You can accumulate penalties, or there are some moves that will get you instantly disqualified. Like jumping with someone's arm in a weird position that would cause an immediate break. Well, the most frustrating thing for me is you had the weigh-in, you had warm-up, and then you might wait a few hours until you actually had your match. So imagine that you gave up on going out with your friends, especially hard for me when I was in the army and I was competing on weekends. You gave up on on eating stuff like junk food, going out with your friends. You went to train, you come to a competition, warm up, wait a few hours, and it can be all be over in 3 seconds. And actually, a lot of my competitions, maybe not 3 seconds, but I would come and I will lose. The 2 years I haven't been in judo, the difference between kids competitions and adult competition, I wasn't a child prodigy anymore. And in judo, different belts compete together. Like I was a blue belt, a beginner blue belt. I competed with black belts. One of them was actually international level talent. So why did I do it? Well, you feel alive when you compete in these type of sports. Maybe it happens in other sports, but in combat sports, I think it's more pronounced than in other sports. As the song goes, everything that kills me makes me feel alive. And also, it's a way to test yourself. And well, I have this psychology, and I would risk more to win. Like my fear of loss is a little bit lower than my desire to win. Even if I know that I'm going to lose, I'm still going to try it. And it's something very central to sports psychology in general. The fear to lose against the desire to win. When you learn sports psychology, it's one of the things they concentrate on. So, how do you score in judo competition? Well, I showed the throws. Throws are scored for their speed, their force, how much control you exert. But the most objective way you can measure if a throw is good or not is where the opponent lands. You land on the side, the opponent lands on the side, you get something that is called Yuko.
Oh wait,
I would call that Yuko. Wazari is a different type of imperfect throw, but better than the Yuko. Well, I have no control over the sound volume, so I will actually let go of the desire to do that. Okay, so throws that the opponent either lands on the shoulder or lands on the shoulder and then on his back, or the back is not completely on the mattress, is something that you get a Wazari, an almost perfect throw. Two Wazaris, mini pon. Pon is the knockout condition I've discussed. And if you get a throw which is completely on his back, fast, and you immediately get an Ippon. You've seen one done to Alexander. I had another nice one of Sagimuki here. By the way, Sagimuki was a child in one of the clubs I trained in, and the team used to take him to the weekend trainings when I had a car. And what about the other types? You also have round in judo. So pins, if you manage to get your opponent with his back to the mat with you on top of him, if you manage to hold him here for a lot of the amount of time, you get score also 15 seconds Yoko, 20 Wazari, 25 Ippon, match ends. And the last things are submissions, either chokes, they are allowed after the age of 11, or arm locks. In judo, you only have arm locks. They are allowed after the age of 15. An opponent can concede the match by tapping on the opponent or gasping in pain, shouting the referee will immediately stop the match. Or in case of a neglectful referee, opponent, it will either end in the opponent passing out or having his arm broken. Happened to one of my opponents once. Not a good feeling. I had a match against one of the friends from our gym in the same competition. I just didn't go for that technique, even when it was there. One thing to break someone that you don't know, another thing to do it to a friend. The thing is, the ground game was probably my best weapon, but better than a lot of the other people in judo in Israel. But you don't get a lot of time to be on the ground. You have 2-3 seconds of stagnation there. The referee will immediately stand you up. Well, this is the loss function of judo. I would say competition is a loss function. the techniques are maybe input features, architecture, the, the human mind, the human body, and the competition is actually the loss function, what you train for. 2002, I done an instructor course, 4 weeks in a Wingate. You learn physiology, anatomy, sport instruction theory, and basic sports psychology. This part you do with people from all Olympic sports, swimmers, taekwondo, athletics, you name it. You have teenagers with adults doing this course together. And there was a sport-specific section. You go over history of judo. We had a practical technique test and practical test in actually giving a class to people. Mine, they simulated the people to be like 5-year-olds. And after that, I was part of the club's staff, the Owen Smaja club. My last year at high school, I would go 2 or 3 days a week to work as a judo coach, training kids. Very, very hard work, but well, better than doing McDonald's, and the salary was a lot higher. I think the minimum wage was like 18 or 21 shekels. I got 30 if I was doing it in tandem with a head coach, and 50 if I was doing it on my own. You also had additional work as referee in gym competitions. Hard work mostly because if you had seen the Yoko landing on the side and Wazari, it was hard to not screw someone unintentionally because the differences are very minute here. Well, the major difference from the beginning, where I started as a child, is that the dojo here was harboring a familial atmosphere. We had training resorts with training camps in a resort with all of the people from the clubs, barbecue meetups. You can see Owen Smaja here with his dog then. And I would continue this until all through my army days and after the army in the university as well. I would come back home and I would go on Fridays to actually train there. I also had a short stint in pro wrestling, not an actual martial art. Theatrical, result is controlled, basically a TV drama with flashy, wasn't like martial arts moves, which need cooperations to do relatively safely. I say relatively because if you look at the injuries, they're horrific, city. And this one I stopped when I got drafted to the army. I would come back every 2-3 weeks being in a tank corps, so no time for that. Well, something that, well, I will finish the judo before getting in depth into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I would put it here because.
Wow, you know the Ran. I see Ran.
Ran Chudnik? Yes, a good friend.
Also
Near the end of my military service, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys came to our gym to train with us. They wanted to hone their throwing techniques. And like I told you, my best weapon was my ground game. I got smashed by them, like 5 minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10 times that I tapped to them. Retrospect, these were the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys in Israel at this time, but anyways, I I thought I was good and I got a taste of what the actual gap to being good in the ground game is. So I added BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts class because they were always connected to each other. Facilities there were still mostly the temporary ones, Shkol Pais, country clubs. And when I started, almost everyone but the coaches were white belts. One here is yellow, but that's not really that the kids' language is not used by your
Problem here wasn't.
What?
The problem here wasn't having
I think you actually had either a blue or a purple one. Alex here used to train with me at that time. Oh, knows what he was
I was
talking about.
the rug they were cleaning.
I heard that time. So got my blue belt at Judo in 2002. I told you that you can get brown and black in about 2 years. 2007, I got started BJJ, had a white belt, still didn't have a brown belt. Well, after the army, went to the Technion. The university have judos as optional courses. So the people that go to university judo are either people that went to judo and stopped doing that and are looking for the academic points, or maybe a parking sticker. You got that if you're in the team in the Technion. For me, it meant that I had actual 2 practices a week other than the Oren Smaja practice. I had 2 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes to that, and I was actually training almost like a real competitor should. And universities had an annual competition. The competition there was obviously easier than what you would get in actual judo ranking competitions. And like I said, I was probably starting to actually get better because of the amount of training I had done. So I actually completed the points for my brown belt here. And as I said earlier, for the judo team, Russian was more or less a prerequisite because the coach there was like a Ukrainian champion, very good trainer, English, Hebrew not that good, still a fantastic trainer. Okay. So 2008, I got my brown belt in judo. 2009, I actually left judo. Since that happened, the whole set of judo changed. They removed leg grabs, which were actually my best throws. They also were in talks of removing something which is my second favorite, arm lock. And I actually had to work to pay rent. I had a scholarship. I didn't make the 92 GPA I needed to make to continue getting the scholarship, so I had to start working. The judo or the smaja trainings were in Netanya, and I had Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Haifa. So I started with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Basically fizzled out from the smajas. My last university competition, I already know that I went in the Samaja gym because I actually had to cut 5 kilos in a week to make weight. I've done worse than that. I once cut like around 8-9 kilos in 2 weeks because I want to try competing at under 73 kilograms. And you will accuse me, but I will still try to make this one work because I like I was a brown belt. The one I competed against was a black belt. I was 90% sure I was going to lose it, but he just put his hand where he shouldn't have and got into the ground. Very flashy move. Was made illegal at 2018. Yeah, the rules said there in judo changes all of the time. Some people would say it's because people from the East European countries tend to win too much and the Japanese isn't like that. Speculation, I'm not going to say more than that. But I left judo. I actually came back because I needed more academic points. It's 2012, but week before the competition, I went to practice. Someone landed with their head on my head, had to get stitches, and couldn't compete in that one. So that was my last judo match. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I said I would get more into depth in that. So it was adapted, and I would actually skip some of the lecture because it's I have until 2:50, right?
I would think.
55.
55, okay.
You have 5 minutes more.
It was actually adapted from judo in Brazil, gained popularity with something called the UFC or MMA. It's practiced both with gi and with no gi. Like you use something called a rash guard mainly so that you won't get bacteria from other people on your skin. Went in one practice today, so that's that. Well, it has all of the techniques in judo. The main difference is the competition structure. Judo, a takedown would get you the win, instant knockout. Jiu-Jitsu, only 2 points. You can get how many points you want, it won't end the match instantly. The only thing that ends the match is a submission. So you can say the architecture is the same between judo and jiu-jitsu. Well, there are some locks that aren't allowed in judo, but they're not the big picture here. The architecture and the features you put in are almost the same. The loss function, very, very different. You get people which are very, very good when you get the fight to the ground. And the philosophy is that most street fights end on the ground anyway between people who are not trained. So you would put your resources to get better there. The structure of BJJ practice, the reverse of judo. You start with a stand-up, sometimes not even that, and you will finish it doing ground technique. Well, with BJJ belts, well, BJJ is not an Olympic sport, so it's basically Wild West there. Usually awarded by coaches. But coach can decide how he wants to promote kids. You only have minimum time you have to spend in one level of belt. Like you have to be 2 years of blue belt before you can be considered to be a purple belt, and you have minimal age requirements. But I would say the belts there are more practical than judo because you actually divide the competition according to these belts. At least in IBJJF, which is the main organization. You have other organizations which are not divided, but use it for that. So, a fun fact, I am actually the Israeli champion for 2011, but at white belt. A bit about, well, I would skip that. I would say that MMA rise in popularity in 2004. Why is it relevant? Mostly because what happened is the local gyms started to turn into big gyms. You have a curriculum here for the gym I'm practicing at, and this is only the youth schedule. There is also an adult schedule. You have gyms that instead of going to a school and training in something that is a hook basically, they have everything. They have boxing, Muay Thai classes, Jiu-Jitsu classes. Interestingly, Judo is not there. Judo is still practiced basically as a hook in most places. Also have capoeira, freestyle wrestling, and MMA. Interesting thing to note here, people who train for the mixed martial arts, which includes all of the other martial arts. Usually they train separately at each martial art, and then the mixed martial art practice is a bit of a fine tuning. So it's like a conjugate gradient optimization. You go in one direction, you go in another direction which is perpendicular to the other. At the end, you do fine tuning to tie it all together. My belt promotions, well, my first one, the blue belt one, was actually a technique test. I was training in Haifa, and we went to Nana to have a test with 3 other people at the same day. That's the only belt I have, that I have a diploma that says I actually got that belt. The other belts, purple belt, well, the blue belt I got before I finished my BSc and went back to from Haifa to Netanya. Purple belt I was awarded when leaving the Haifa gym to go to Netanya again. I came back to a master's, then came back to Netanya. The trainer gave me the purple belts the last practice before I left. Brown belt in Ramat Gan. I told the coach I moved to Tel Aviv, from south of Tel Aviv to central Tel Aviv. A year after that, and with 2 goals, I told the trainer there, I cannot make the trip there. I don't have parking when I go back. I asked him about what do you think about training at this gym, and he said, well, this trainer is very good. And one of the last training sessions, he gave me the brown belt. If the person you are training under doesn't treat students that live the way he treated me, it's a very, very bad alarm sign. There are some coaches that you would tell them you leave their gym to another gym, they would go berserk. But I had luck to train only under decent coaches. And my black belt, I was asked to produce a seminar plan by Ran Belt, my coach in Tel Aviv, the head coach in the Tel Aviv gym. I think I was probably the only one that was like me and the 2 persons that got the black belt at this session. Probably the only ones that will ask me to produce that. You can find it on my computer still. So I got my black belt. So I said I will get to the interesting stuff at the end. What are the educational benefits of going to a gym and well, practicing techniques that could hurt people? Well, if you go to the idea of Gar O'Connell, mental and moral education, and you get discipline. In order to be good at a martial art, you have to have discipline and preservation. This is true in any case. Respect and humility, that depends on the coach, but you will probably have better results. You have to have respect for the training partners you train with, and to learn new stuff, you have to have humility. Don't stick to your own guns. Be open to learn new stuff. Also, controlling emotions, accepting defeat. You would get submitted or thrown or lose at one point, and you need to learn how to accept it. If you ask Kano, it's also learn how to win. You slow someone, you give them a hand to stand them up. This is what he put as a mutual welfare and benefit. This is how we phrase that. In Japanese, probably, but physical education, obviously, you learn how to fall and get up, you build resilience, and according to what he envisioned, the principle of being efficient in your throws using resource efficiency should translate to society as well. My schnecker on this, it depends heavily on the instructor you go with. The people that go to martial arts class, they are put in a very vulnerable positions in lots of cases. Losing martial arts is a little bit harder than losing other sports, some in primal at your brain. And some coaches, I told you about one red flag, and there are other red flags. So if you want to go to a martial arts, first go there, look at one class, talk with the coach. Either if you go there, doubly so if you send your children there. I know this one friend that got burned, stopped doing jiu-jitsu for a few years and came back only in COVID time when he spent time in Thailand, like 2 years in Japan. That's because his gym was operating like a cult. Also, you might get overconfident in your abilities in the real fights. The best self-defense is either not to get into a fight, or I don't know if Brad is here, but yeah, run away from there. You don't know when the other one will use something well, armed. Other benefits, fun and friends. This is me at the Haifa gym 2 months ago. I visited there, called my friend, do you want to meet up? He said, yeah, of course, why don't you come and give a class at my gym? And you have a worldwide community. This is actually a BJJ Slack for Apple. This is me when I was traveling Australia with my wife. She would stay and work in the evenings from time to time. I just went to gyms in Australia there and practiced there. Well, epilogue, well, while I was writing this, I received my second degree black belt. Yeah, actually, well, in what Ran said when he gave it to me was appreciative of my perseverance while encountering pretty hard times. The last years for me have been uneasy, to say the least. If you know, you know. I started teaching wrestling or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu once a week voluntarily. Just opened a WhatsApp group, asked Iran if I can come and do that off the grid, and he was very supportive on that. Always had a dream to actually have some frame that you would practice both the takedowns and the submissions, because Judo people don't like the ground, at least the Israeli ones. They don't know submissions. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ones don't know takedowns, and both is lacking in my point of view. So I'm glad I can do that. I had a weird experience of actually cornering a fighter, one of our kids.
Okay.
One of our kids that came to my morning classes asked me to come to his fight, and I found myself being in his corner there. I think my heart rate was more than his when he started the fight. So I've currently found a way to train like 5 times a week, mostly by doing 7 a.m. Training. I put my oldest child on a car to a kindergarten, take the bike, go there, and 8 o'clock I start heading to work at by 8:30. And I hope to continue doing it until I'm 60 years old and maybe get my goals into that as well. Well, any questions? No, we don't have a lot of time, but if you want to ask something, then now would be a good time. I've got a lot of content from this lecture, like effectiveness of martial arts and stuff like that. If you have any other questions you want to ask.
Any comments on the effectiveness?
Well, it depends for what. Like judo is good. Like, judo is very, very good if people wear long clothes. Better than wrestling. You would very effective in Russia, in Japan for that reason. Very, very hard in warmer countries. And like I said, evaluating this is a little bit problematic. MMA, UFC is the closest thing you have to evaluation of all of the martial arts. And it doesn't measure effectiveness of one martial art, but you can see a statistic of what base martial art led to a more successful fighter. And also it doesn't translate to real fights as well, because in the UFC you cannot hit the back of the head or the spine. They would stand you up if you're passive on the ground. So it's hard to evaluate, but wrestling is the best base that they found. Everyone here trains everything. Like there is no fighter right now that doesn't train striking, wrestling, submissions, but Wrestling is the most successful one. After that, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing after that. But everyone trains everything. So do it for yourself, like more than you do it for effectiveness. It also helps to diffuse fights because you feel confident in yourself that if you would get into a fight, you might handle it. I actually had the unfortunate incident of my friend trying to get me into a fight with other people. And I just lifted the person and didn't put him down because that would have escalated the situation. And we shook hands, laughed, and went away. If I didn't do, well, if I didn't go with my friend, he would probably get into a fight himself. And if I didn't have the presence of mind to look for the peaceful solution there, it might have ended really, really badly.
Have you
So,
dabbled in
best
striking?
advice, what?
Have you dabbled in striking arts? Karate?
Oh, yeah, I do striking. Yeah. If especially now, after all, when this kid started wanting me to corner him, then I do boxing once a week. I do MMA once a week. I actually had done it at other time frames as well, if it was after the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But it's something that I would never get competitive about because I don't want the brain damage. It's fun and you can train it safely with the gym boxing gloves and in lower intensity, but I wouldn't go and compete in that. So it's not my main sport. Okay.